Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, everyone. This is Laurie Smith on Blog Talk Radio. Good evening. It is 10 o'clock p.m. here, Calgary, Alberta, Friday night, February the 11th. I'm glad to be here. This is Child Abuse Prevention and Human Rights Abuse Prevention is up to us. 30-minute live internet streaming radio broadcast from blogtalkradio.com, and chat room is open there if anybody would like to sit in there and hang out. Thanks, everybody, for tuning into my shows. I really appreciate it. I know so many people are listening to my shows. I don't know who you all are, and I thank you very much for tuning in. And tonight I want to talk about, it's a PDF, and I got it from the Child Welfare Information Gateway, and that's www.childwelfare.gov, and it was posted in 2009, July 2009. It's a PDF that they published in 2009 called Definitions of Child Abuse and Neglect, Summary of State Laws. There's some good information on there. It's kind of rather current. It's really one of the more current publications out there. So it's not all that old, so I thought we'd take a look at that and just kind of run through what are the definitions of child abuse and neglect and whatnot. So thanks, everybody, for being here. I really appreciate it. And I'm not a counselor or therapist or anything like that. I'm just a private citizen paying to do my own blog talk shows, and I started doing this November 2009. It's been over a year, a little bit over a year, and I had no idea how many shows I'd be doing. I thought I started out thinking, well, I'll do this for a couple months, see how many people are listening or whether it's worth doing, and it really turned into quite a lot of shows during the week, and then I just kept going. So mainly because people are listening. So thank you very much for tuning in. I appreciate it. And so many people. I know that so many people are dealing with the issues and the aftermath of being abused as children, and that's why I do the show in the morning, one child abuse survivor to another, because I'm a survivor. I know how hard it is on our daily walk, and I just like to promote awareness and education regarding child abuse and human rights abuses. So mainly I'm focusing on child abuse, but I'm very much interested in human rights and all rights for all humans, and even animal rights, right? I don't mind standing up for them. I'm not ashamed or embarrassed to say that I fight for all human rights and for animal rights. I wish that we lived in a better world. I didn't like what I saw. I didn't like what I grew up with. I didn't like the way I was treated. I didn't like the way that my family suffered, watching my family suffer and be destroyed in this abuse. And the abuse of my parents, mainly it was obviously my parents' fault for that, for doing that. And but it's just sad to see that and to grow up with that, just watching your family be destroyed. And I know so many people's lives are affected by abuse. So that's why I'm doing these shows. So you have to listen at your own discretion. I'm talking about abuse, and abuse is a very sensitive subject. So if you're not comfortable with the topic of abuse, it's clearly your discretion to turn it off, right? You have to listen at your own discretion. And young people under the age of 18, I just ask that you have permission to listen to my shows, because I'm all about protecting children and trying to help children stay safe and protected. And so, if you're a young person under the age of 18, I ask that you get permission from your parents or a caregiver, somebody who's an adult who can help you make the decision on whether you should be listening to my shows, because I don't know how old or how young the people are who are listening to my shows. So, you just want to have permission to listen to the show. Have them listen with you, and then they can help you make the decision whether you should be listening or not, right? It's very important. And keep yourself safe when you're in a chat room situation. That's the whole idea here. Chat rooms, scary situation for young people who are vulnerable and don't know how to keep yourself safe. It can get you in a whole lot of trouble. There's a lot of child sexual predators and pedophiles out there who pose and say that they're 12, 13-year-olds who go to the schools in your city, and they'll try to find out what school you go to, and they'll try to find out where you live and your phone number and all this, and they'll try to get your name and your teacher's name and all this. And what it is, it's not a 12 or 13-year-old or 15-year-old. It's probably a 20, 30, 40-year-old person, sexual predator, who is sitting on the other end of that chat room, who's posing as a young person just to get your information so they can get a hold of you and assault you sexually. So you do not want to be a victim of a child sexual predator. So you make sure, if you're a young person listening to this, that you learn how to keep yourself safe in the chat rooms. And if nobody's taught you how to do that, just go onto your browser and type in Internet Safety for Children, Online Safety for Children, or Internet Safety, things like this, and that'll bring you to websites that will give you some good tips on how to keep yourself safe online, right? So important. So we'll get right into this topic here. And this is from Child Welfare Information Gateway, Definitions of Child Abuse and Neglect, Summary of State Laws from www.childwelfare.gov, and it was posted current through July 2009. So Child Welfare Information Gateway put this out. It's also from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Administration for Children and Families, Administration on Children, Youth and Families, Children's Bureau. And this is, it's pretty heavy duty, the types of abuse. It's absolutely horrific. Abuse, it's just so horrible, whether it's physical, verbal, emotional, psychological, sexual, abuse, neglect. It's all incredibly wrong. And so they go through and they talk about all the different types of abuse, and they said that nearly all the states, the District of Columbia, American Samoa, Guam, Northern Mariana Islands, Puerto Rico, and the U.S. Virgin Islands provide civil definitions of child abuse and neglect in statute. As applied to the reporting statutes, these definitions determine the grounds for intervention by state child protective agencies. The states recognize the different types of abuse in their definitions, including physical abuse, neglect, sexual abuse, and emotional abuse. Some states also provide definitions in statute or for parental substance abuse and or for abandonment as child abuse, right? So it depends on what state you live in. Generally, most people agree, to a certain extent, what is, child physical abuse, what is child sexual abuse, what is verbal abuse, psychological abuse. So physical abuse, they write in this PDF, physical abuse is generally defined as any non-accidental physical injury to the child and can include striking, kicking, burning, or biting the child, or any action that results in a physical impairment of the child. In approximately 38 states in American Samoa, Guam, and the Northern Mariana Islands, Puerto Rico, and the Virgin Islands, the definition of abuse also includes acts or circumstances that threaten the child with harm or create a substantial risk of harm to the child's health or welfare. And some of the states are taking this on as well, as part of their own statutes, is what is physical abuse. That circumstances, acts, or circumstances that threaten the child with harm or create a substantial risk of harm to the child's health or welfare. And neglect is frequently defined as the failure of a parent or other person with responsibility for the child to provide needed food, clothing, shelter, medical care, or supervision such that the child's health, safety, and well-being are threatened with harm. So that's more like physical neglect, right? Approximately 24 states, the District of Columbia, American Samoa, Puerto Rico, and the Virgin Islands, include failure to educate the child as required by law in their definition of neglect. And 7 states specifically define medical neglect as failing to provide any special medical treatment or mental health care needed by the child. In addition, 4 states define as medical neglect the withholding of medical treatment or nutrition from disabled infants with life-threatening conditions. So it depends on what state you live in to what they actually consider to be some of these different forms and types of abuse, right? Sexual abuse exploitation, all states include sexual abuse in their definitions of child abuse. Some states refer in general terms to sexual abuse, while others specify various acts of sexual abuse. Sexual exploitation is an element of the definition of sexual abuse in most jurisdictions. I would hope so. Sexual exploitation includes allowing the child to engage in prostitution or in the production of child pornography. And emotional abuse, they say almost all states, the District of Columbia, American Samoa, Guam, the Northern Mariana Islands, Puerto Rico, and the Virgin Islands include emotional maltreatment as part of their definitions of abuse or neglect. And approximately 32 states, the District of Columbia, the Northern Mariana Islands, Puerto Rico, provide specific definitions of emotional abuse or mental injury to a child. And typical language used in these definitions is injury to the psychological capacity or emotional stability of the child, as evidenced by an observable or substantial change in behavior, emotional response, or cognition, or is evidenced by anxiety, depression, withdrawal, or aggressive behavior. And parental substance abuse. Parental substance abuse is an element of the definition of child abuse or neglect in some states. Circumstances that are considered abuse or neglect in some states include prenatal exposure of a child to harm due to the mother's use of illegal drug or other substance. 14 states and the District of Columbia include that in there. Manufacture of a controlled substance in the presence of a child or on the premises occupied by a child, that's incorporated in 10 state statutes. Allowing a child to be present where the chemicals or equipment for the manufacture of controlled substances are used or stored. 3 states have that in theirs. Selling, distributing, or giving drugs or alcohol to a child. 7 states and Guam include that one in there. Use of a controlled substance by a caregiver that impairs the caregiver's ability to adequately care for the child. 7 states include that one. And abandonment is approximately 17 states and the District of Columbia include abandonment in their definition of abuse or neglect, and generally as a type of neglect. Approximately 18 states, Guam, Puerto Rico, and the Virgin Islands, provide definitions for abandonment that are separate from the definition of neglect. It's what they count it as a separate type of abuse, abandonment. In general, it is considered abandonment of the child when the parent's identity or whereabouts are unknown, the child has been left by the parent in circumstances in which the child suffers serious harm, the parent has failed to maintain contact with the child or to provide reasonable support for a specified period of time. And they said standards for reporting. Generally speaking, a report must be made when an individual knows or has reasonable cause to believe or suspect that a child has been subjected to abuse or neglect. And these standards guide mandatory reporters in deciding whether to make a report to Child Protective Services. And persons responsible for the child, in addition to defining acts or omissions that constitute child abuse or neglect, several states' statutes provide specific definitions of persons who can be reported to Child Protective Services as perpetrators of abuse or neglect. And these are persons who have some relationship or regular responsibility for the child. And this generally includes parents, guardians, foster parents, relatives, or other caregivers responsible for the child's welfare. So they go on to talk about this and really kind of getting really into the states, the actual states' codes of what is physical abuse, the different citations, and they give the numbers and everything, and for the different states. So, they have Alabama, and they really go into, sexual abuse includes and sexual exploitation includes, right? So this is really an interesting PDF. And you can find this on the Child Welfare Information Gateway. And it's just absolutely important that people realize that this is happening. And when you look at the stats out there, you look at what's actually happening, some of the latest stats that we were able to pull up and actually able to see, anybody who's actually looking for this information, it's kind of hard to find the most current stats because they're still working on those reports. So, you never really get an accurate report, of what's happening February 2011. Because those reports are being worked on, and it'll take them a while to compile that information. So it's like some of the last stats that I saw out there on fact sheets and whatnot put out by federally funded government studies where they compiled all the information from all the databases and they got it all together. They came up with a number: 1 in 3 to 4 girls and 1 in 6 to 7 boys will be abused in some way under the age of 18 as children, right? Depending on how old the child is considered to be a child in the state. Some state statutes are 16, some are 18, right? Just depends on what state you're from. But generally, an average of 18 years old. Anyone under the age of 18 in most places are still considered to be children. And 1 in 3 to 4 girls and 1 in 6 to 7 boys will have been abused under the age of 18, and that's horrific. I mean, that's just absolutely ridiculous. But we know that it's true because I know so many survivors myself. And I can count them all out, but it would take the rest of the show to do it. And then we'd waste the whole show trying to count out how many people I knew who were personally and witnessed abuse against people that I knew in my lifetime. And now, because of what I do, the work that I do with Dreamcatchers for Abused Children, and also because I'm a survivor, and I'm on a lot of survivor sites and just, really out here trying to be another voice for survivors who can't speak out and trying to be a bit of a resource for people. And, I know a lot of people who are survivors of child abuse. And it's, the numbers have to be correct because you just think about how many people that I've met in my lifetime who voluntarily disclosed that they were abused or that I witnessed the abuse. You know what I mean? I actually witnessed some of it. So, and they witnessed some of mine too. So that's the whole issue. I just knew so many kids who were abused. One of my friends was raped by her father repeatedly over a period of years, and it just horrible, absolutely horrible. Another friend of mine, her brother was raping her and sexually using her for years. But see, I was being abused and sexually abused and abused in every way. So we all grew up abused. So when you grow up like that and there's no help for you, you don't think about reporting it. You know what I mean? It's part of your life. It's what you're dealing with. When you're being abused like that and you're being mistreated and your family's dysfunctional and you've never seen any normalcy, you're not going to think about getting help. You know what I mean? I think it'd be a little bit different if you had a normal life and then all of a sudden a step parent came in or somebody came into the home and then started abusing you. You might think, oh my God, this is I got to report this. I got to tell somebody. You know what I mean? But when you grow up like that, and that's how you live your life, from day one, it's a little different. So many children are abused, and they never get any help. We see these headlines out here, and these poor kids headlines. The only reason that they're really making the headlines is because they're either dead, they've been killed and murdered at the hands of their parents or caregivers, or they're in the hospital due to the abuse they've suffered. And it's so horrific that it makes the headlines. But you should see, there's so many children who do not make the headlines who are abused every day, and they won't make the headlines. We'll never hear about their voices. We'll never know about their funerals. There's so many children that are killed and murdered, so many children who are battered and beaten and in the hospital due to broken bones and burns and everything else. So many children who are raped and sodomized every night, molested, by their parents and caregivers and whoever else gets a hold of them. And they will not make the papers. We will not know who these kids are. And the only reason why anybody knows who I am is because I'm speaking out. And I decided that, hey, I don't mind. It's sure I was more uncomfortable being abused than I am talking about it. I'll tell you that. And does it make me uncomfortable? The thought of that I might hurt a few family members' feelings? No, I don't, because they didn't mind hurting me. You know what I mean? My family did not mind that I was being abused and watched it and actually encouraged it. So, why would I care about that? So that's the whole issue. I don't mind speaking out, right? But I know a lot of people have a real hard time with it. And so, there's a few of us out here who are willing and who can do it, right? It's not that there's something special about us. It's the fact that sometimes people cannot speak out about the abuse that they're suffering because the abuser's still living. They fear for their lives many times. There's many, many issues surrounding it. And some people would just never be comfortable with the thought of ever coming forward with their abuse, right? So we know this is horrific, and there are so many people who have suffered through this, and we may work with them, you may be going to church with them, they may be living right next door to you, and you would never know it if they don't ever disclose it. But abuse is a crisis. It's a crisis. And when you think about 1 in 3 to 4 girls and 1 in 6 to 7 boys experiencing some form of abuse under the age of 18, and then you think of 1 in 3 girls and 1 in 6 boys being abused sexually under the age of 18, which is the stats as well. Those are also factual stats from government federal studies that were done. It's horrific, So take a look around here, especially on some of these websites where they really go into looking at the stats and the facts, and that's the Child Welfare Information Gateway, and also the National Clearinghouse on Domestic Violence and Child Abuse and whatnot. Those types of websites have lots and lots of good information on them for people who are really looking to see just what a serious issue child abuse really is. And it's incredibly serious. Otherwise, I wouldn't be bothered doing these shows. I'd like to go nationwide on a national platform if I could, like Oprah or something, where, I'd have a show on, not just me, I'd like to be involved in getting something like this going, because I don't mind being a voice. I don't mind being, it doesn't bother me to talk about this stuff, as people can tell. This is like almost my 600th show or something. I know I've done about 580 shows, and I don't mind talking about this stuff, but I know that a lot of people do, and it makes a lot of people uncomfortable, but it's just that we have to talk about this. We have to address it. We have to, as a society, talk about this, because otherwise it's never going to change. It will never change. It'll just continue to be silenced and swept under the rug, and nobody wants to hear about it. And sadly enough, these kids don't want to be abused out here, right? No, they don't ask for it, and they don't want to be abused, and yet, they're still being abused, and it's because it's all being swept under the carpet. Nobody wants to know, So I think it's just important that we draw huge national attention to it. Not 1 month a year, As much as I think that's great, 1 month a year devoted to child abuse awareness down in the States. Canada has 1 day a year, so there you go. But at least the States have 1 month a year devoted to child abuse prevention. And, it should be every day. And it should be a national campaign that would just run 365 days a year, where every day is Child Abuse Prevention Day. Right, Child Abuse Prevention Awareness Day. Right, let's stop child abuse every day, and it should be something where people do holding hands around the country. Let's stop child abuse. Let's stop child abuse. Right, but no, people don't want to hear about abused children. You know why? Because it hits too close to home. because people are always, so many people hurt their children on a regular daily basis. Slapping their kids around, or dragging them through the bedrooms to beat on them, withholding emotional support, withholding love, verbal abuse, all to try to control the child, right? And even teenagers, right? So see, people don't want to look within their own homes. They don't want to look within themselves to say, how am I treating my child? Am I an abuser? Is it possible that I've warped my child, and that that's the whole issue. It causes people to have to look at their own behaviors, and many adults don't like to do that, because they don't like to have to think about the fact that they have not done a good job parenting and raising their child, and that they probably are responsible for abusing them. And see, people don't want to look at their own. People are not very honest with themselves when it comes to stuff like that, and that's why we have a problem with society wanting to live in denial, right? It's just easier to live in denial. We have people who beat on their children, rape their children, and just live in this world of denial. It's like, and the rest of the family knows that the child's being raped and the child's being abused, but, they live in denial because nobody wants to face the abuser, nobody wants to face the courts, nobody wants to face the cops when they come. Nobody wants to deal with that, so they let the child continue to be abused. And that's wrong. It's so wrong in every way. And it really has to stop. And I think silence is the issue. We have to stop silencing abuse. We have to speak out against it, stand up and start talking about it, and get something done. There's a whole lot of people who have been working their whole lives to help save children's lives. And I'm so thankful for those people, and for many, many years. And so I'm just, glad to be another voice out here to come behind them and say, yeah, this is absolutely ridiculous, that children are still being abused, even though we're spending, $105 billion every year because of child abuse in the United States alone. Who knows what Canada is spending. And, you think about that, $105 billion because of child abuse. Well, why are we not stopping child abuse? Like, why is it okay that a certain number of children, are abused every day or killed? It's not okay. And it's not okay that people are using children for sex toys. Like, I was not a sex toy, right? I was sexually abused as a child, and I'm not a sex toy, and I was not a sex toy. And it bothers me that people sexually use children. It just makes me sick, because it's like, why? I don't get that. And yet, 1 in 3 girls and 1 in 6 boys will be sexually abused, sexually exploited, sexually molested, sexually raped, sodomized, you name it, under the age of 18. Now, that bothers me. You know what I mean? Like, it really bothers me. And we really, for people to stand by and say, oh, no big deal, it's not happening to me, it's like, that is such a wrong attitude to have. And yet so many people will behave that way and not want to get involved just because it's not my problem, I don't know. It just shows you where their hearts are. And, there's so many people actually really do not care. And it's obvious that people don't care because they're abusing their children, right? If people really cared about their children, they wouldn't be raping them, they wouldn't be beating on them, they wouldn't be burning them, they wouldn't be calling them names and psychologically abusing them. They just wouldn't be doing that because they would be taking good care of their children. But there's a whole lot of very, very sick people out there. And then there's all these other sick people that get a hold of children who are not the parents, who are another family member or, child sexual predators, babysitters, you name it, So really, this is absolutely crazy that this is going on still today, 2011. That's why I say let it be this generation. Why not? If we get enough people to stand up and we get enough, funding, we get enough organizations and people backing up these organizations to do the work, because it's going to take a lot of work to educate the young people and get the programs going, we could stop the cycle of violence within people's home. We could stop child abuse. Because it's a choice. People choose to do that. They choose to shake their babies, rape their babies, kill their babies. They choose to beat up their kids and burn their kids and lock their kids up in closets and not feed them for 2 years. They choose to do this to their children, right? It's a choice. Nobody's forcing them to. They just do it because they want to. And we could stop that by getting a hold of the young people and really showing them what is a healthy relationship between parent-child, a healthy parent-child relationship. And what is a healthy What are the developmental stages, right, of children's behaviors, and how would you cope with a child who's just crying and just special needs child, right? So that people will not abuse their children, because we could get these younger generations to start thinking about this and start thinking, yeah, this is wrong. We could get a whole generation of young people to not abuse their children. We could break the cycle of abuse, right? And I think that'd be so awesome. So why not? Let's just do it, But we're going to have to. It's going to take a lot of work, and it's going to take more than just a few people. And so, do whatever you can in your own capacity, within your own, neighborhoods and communities, to get involved with whoever's doing some good work. I mean, I look around here in Calgary. There are some awesome groups doing a lot of work. We have CASA here. We have Little Warriors up in Edmonton, which is 3 hours north of here, and they're all about preventing and stopping child sexual abuse. We have so many different groups here that do work, good work within the communities, but you never hear much from them publicly. There's not very many groups actually speaking out publicly about preventing and stopping child abuse. So it's not, you don't see very many write-ups in the paper. You don't see anything on the news. I saw one ad last year, a total of one ad about stopping child abuse, and it was a provincial-wide, Canada-wide ad. It wasn't just a local kind of Alberta ad, where I'm at. And so, it's just important to know, take a look around what's going on in your own community, and then get involved and back up whatever is working. We do have some good stuff up here too, but it's just Dreamcatchers will be eventually Dreamcatchers for Abused Children will be eventually a charity up here, a not-for-profit as well. But we're just waiting because we're going to get the headquarters open up down in the States first. But once that happens, we'll be up here as well, and hopefully I'll be involved in opening up that office up here because we need more attention drawn to this issue. And, it's horrific. It's absolutely crazy. So you can go and check this particular PDF, and you can look through, if you're in the States, they actually list state by state all the different codes of what, emotional abuse is, what abandonment is within those states' laws, right? And what child physical abuse is. Like, for instance, in Missouri, physical abuse citation, ANN.stat, and then they give the numbers. Abuse means any physical injury inflicted on a child by other than accidental means by those responsible for the child's care, custody, and control. That's Missouri. But then they vary from state to state. So Montana, physical abuse means an intentional act, omission, or gross negligence resulting in substantial skin bruising, internal bleeding, substantial injury to skin, subdural hematoma, burns, bone fractures, extreme pain, permanent or temporary disfigurement, impairment of any bodily organ or function, or death. Child abuse or neglect means actual physical or psychological harm to a child, substantial risk of physical or psychological harm to a child, abandonment. Like, they really go into detail here in Montana, whereas Missouri, very limited on their wording as far as child physical abuse goes. And Montana just goes on and on about it. The term includes actual physical or psychological harm to a child, or substantial risk of physical or psychological harm to a child, exposing a child to criminal distribution of dangerous drugs, criminal production or manufacture of dangerous drugs, etc. And so you can go state by state and see what the actual statutes are from state to state. So it's really quite interesting to see how much they do differ. As far as, like, some are really cover a lot more of the issues than some of the other states. So it is really quite interesting. They should all be universal. It should all be the same. It shouldn't matter what state the child is born in. It's not the child's fault they're born in one state and the next state over has so much better, definitions, by definition and citations of what abuse really is. So thanks everybody for tuning in. I appreciate everybody being here. I'll be on the weekend here. I might have to change some show times, but I'll still be on. And on Monday, I'll be back on One Child Abuse Survivor to Another in the morning, 6 a.m. On February 14th. And then Monday night, Dreamcatchers Talk Radio, we have Ray Luskin coming on, and she's going to talk to us about adult survivor issues on Dreamcatchers Talk Radio, talking about self-love, nurturing, learning how to take care of ourselves, right? So I hope that everybody will, if you're a survivor of child abuse, if you know somebody is, who is, that's going to be a great show. Ray Luskin is a good friend of mine. She's a good friend of Dreamcatchers for Abused Children, and she's a survivor, and she's come on the show a few times, and she's been on my show as well, and just a really nice lady, and she's got some great info regarding, how to help ourselves as survivors of abuse, how to learn how to take care of ourselves, learn how to self-soothe, self-nurture, how to love ourselves, that we do count, we do matter, and that, there is help and there's hope out there. Right, so I love talking to Ray, and she's an awesome lady, so she's taking the time to come on the show. Dreamcatchers Talk Radio here on Blog Talk Radio, www.blogtalkradio.com/Dreamcatchers. And you can catch that Monday night, February 14th at 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, or 10 p.m. Central Standard Time, 9 p.m. Mountain Standard Time, and I'll be hosting that as well. So it'll be me and Ray talking about that stuff. So have a great night and a great weekend. If you need something, get a hold of me on Blog Talk Radio or Facebook or wherever, and we'll talk to you again next week. Bye-bye.